Once upon a time, there existed a giant tree that was the source of mana. A war, however, caused this tree to wither away, and a hero's life was sacrificed in order to take its place. Grieving over the loss, the goddess disappeared into the heavens. The goddess left the angels with this edict: "You must wake me, for if I should sleep, the world shall be destroyed." The angels bore the chosen one, who headed towards the tower that reached unto the heavens. And that marked the beginning of the regeneration of the world. This opening monologue, delivered by Kratos at the beginning of the game, by the end, seems to have been nothing more than a myth at first glance. But first glances aren't what you come to this channel for. And it's time that we delve into a property that in no small way changed my life. That property, as you can tell by the title, is Tales of Symphonia, the 5th title in the indisputably legendary Tales of franchise. However, today, we won't be talking about things like graphics or what hardware to play the game on, none of that technical stuff, not that I care too much about any of those things anyways. In fact, it's always been kind of annoying to me seeing reviews that spend like 20 plus minutes detailing how the frame rate is 2% worse quality and how they just can't help but notice it. Like, I know that a big part of video games is, the gameplay, obviously. But for me, I've always thought that a good story and great characters can overcome any janky mechanic or stilted graphic. Using Symphonia as an example, lots of people complain about the chibi, doughy sort of art style that the models are made in, and for clarity's sake, I'm not saying that they were actually amazing all along, and in fact, I'd love an update on the look, like something closer to what later titles did. And some people will say like, oh, but I'm looking at the way the game holds up and performs in whatever year it is here, not how good it was back when the game came out. And that's valid, I guess, but particularly with video game technology, I don't think it's a very fair lens to have on at all times. But I said we're not going to talk about that stuff today, and we aren't. We look instead at the story of Symphonia and explore something that I don't think I've ever heard anyone else bring up when talking about this game. Also, major spoilers ahead. The majority of fans will take the approach that the myths of the Church of Martel and its veneration of the goddess are meant to ring hollow and come to be exposed as lies the deeper into the game that one progresses. However, in this video, I'd like to argue the opposite, that no matter the depths of Mythos' madness, everything he and our party of heroes did is wrapped up in a little concept known as divine providence. By the end of the game, the opening monologue has at once been overturned, but more importantly, been rendered both retroactively and presently true. So come with me today as we explore free will, atheism versus faith, and the concept of being chosen. Light topics, right? Before we start, let's get a standard definition of the concept of divine providence established. The most popular comes from St. Thomas Aquinas, detailed in his, you guessed it, Summa Theologica. Thomas writes providence as, in the most summarized way I can put it, God's care for the universe and its people, and the need of those people for confidence in the Almighty. Basically, divine providence concerns the outcome of events, taking into account only the end of a goal and not the means to achieving that goal, which is formed and needed by the free will of humanity, by those who would choose evil ends and those who would choose good. Providence takes into account both of these choices as they happen, so that the divine plan's end goal will always be the same, no matter the morality or immorality of all parties involved. Though because God is the font from which all goodness flows, those who take the higher moral road, even if they too, along the way, in their flawed humanity, make morally questionable or objectionable choices, will be given success, whether that be in this life or the next. I hear you asking now, though, what does any of that have to do with Symphonia? We're getting there. Right now, actually. When our story begins in the village of Visalia, we are given the legend of Mythos the hero and the purpose of the Chosen One: to release the seals, awaken Martel, and restore mana to Silverond. As the game goes on, however, this simple premise is deconstructed over and over and over again. The Chosen has no guaranteed success. However, there will always be another to take up the mantle if that happens. And even if they fail, it is assumed that they will receive an honored place among the angels. While this might seem incongruous with what I said earlier about the concept of Providence, it actually ties back around nicely, at least when looked at without the knowledge that our heroes come to learn. To the average denizen of both worlds, the goddess's will is that the suffering of the world will eventually cease, even if it isn't right now with this particular chosen. With the knowledge that we gain, it is easy to dismiss the concept of an overarching divine plan and attribute everything to the tenacity and willpower of our party and their accomplices, or the malevolence and selfishness of our enemies. However, I would argue that it was the divine plan itself which brought our particular groups together. To explain, let's look at the ending scene and the newly awakened Martel's words to Lloyd. "I am Mana, and I am the giant tree." Some will inevitably point out that Martel also mentions that she is a new spirit, born of the hopes of Lloyd, his friends, people like him, and the people who were sacrificed for Mythos' sister. But I feel as if the term new is being used in a different sense than expected, for if Martel is Mana itself, then she must have always been there from the beginning of all things, in some form, or life wouldn't have begun. I believe that when she says new, she means that this is the newest form taken on by an eternal divine presence, which has always been there. Before, it was as the tree itself, and then as the seed, and now that same divine consciousness exists as Martel. In the background of it all, this divine being has been there, dormant or awake, guiding the entirety of the world's history. From the Great Kharlan War, to Mythos' original journey of regeneration, to the world's splitting, and the subsequent journeys, failed and successful, of the various Chosens. All of this to the end goal of bringing together Lloyd Irving, Colette Brunel, Genus and Rain Sage, Zelos Wilder, Shino Fujibayashi, Regal Bryant, Persea Competir, and the rest of their allies and enemies alike together. Each tragedy in their backstory, and each victory throughout the story, brought them to the point where they could defeat Mythos, who in creating the two worlds and manipulating the lineages of those with the blood of the angels was part of this plan. The death and destruction wrought by Crucius, the Desians, even the horrific nature of what being a chosen one means for a declining world, all of that could not have happened without the merging of free will and providence. In one fell swoop, the mists of the two worlds had been swept away, but at the same time had become true. Mythos did die in order for the goddess to return, becoming effectively the first and last chosen one. And the edict given to the angels was also true, for when Martel slept, the world had been destroyed. Even Zelos, who was chosen of Tetheala, didn't have a journey to go on, did fulfill the role and its duties, albeit in his own way. Colette and Zelos, in destroying the system that had made them chosen ones, proved their worthiness of the titles, regenerating both worlds and reuniting them, as they had always meant to be. Not to discount at all the actions of Lloyd and the others besides the two chosen, each of them an unfolding part of this tapestry that begins with the dormition of Mythos' sister Martel, sprawling out into the veneration of the goddess, the implementation of the chosen system, and ending up with the incarnation of Mana, who takes on the role and name of the goddess Martel. Even the methods she speaks of keeping this new tree alive ring with divine goodness. She says, "You must provide the tree with love and adoration." Her wish is explicitly not the wish of Mythos' sister, nor does she ask that all living things be perfect and worthy, for she knows, being the incarnation of life, that they aren't. She asks only that the tree be given the greatest gift that all the living can offer, love, from humans and elves and half-elves alike. If it is the weakness of people's hearts that allows for discrimination, then it is the strength of vulnerability, the kind that only love awakens, that can counteract such a thing. There is something of that love to be seen in the name that Lloyd gives the new tree, which we can find out by looking at Tales of Fantasia, which Symphonia actually serves as a prequel to. Lloyd calls the tree Yggdrasil, a signal that his remorse over Mythos' death, despite everything, wasn't a hollow gesture. When seas will cover lands, and when men will be no more. During a confrontation with Mythos, Colette begins to state her belief in a higher divine power, calling this being the goddess known as Conscience, only to be interrupted by Mythos, who spitefully declares that there is no goddess, marking completely his surrender and denialism and atheism. This short line of dialogue, probably overlooked by many, is the closest thing to a linchpin of my argument that I can find. Not only does it show the strength of Colette's character, that after having her face shaken, being subject to all manner of cruelty, having her life taken and then restored, she still sees the worthiness of the world, the beauty of life, and those who have been given it. but it also illustrates a strength found uniquely in faith, and the certainty in trusting in forces beyond one's true comprehension or self. Remember what St. Thomas said about Providence. One of the key defining features of the concept is not only the care of the Almighty for the people, but the people's need for confidence in the Almighty. Colette demonstrates this here. Despite everything, she still believes in a higher power, in a plan greater than herself, greater than the two worlds, greater even than Mythos himself. It is that last part that I believe causes Mythos to truly reject such ideals. For to him the Church of Martel and its stories are nothing but that, stories, lies told to the humans by themselves, corruptions of the truth that he has let grow in order to solidify his control over the two worlds. He, in his broken state, believes that the world is too cruel, its people far beyond anything but damnation, for any sort of divine being or plan to exist. In some way, he believes that it is only his plan that matters, and because the belief in the goddess was ultimately founded by him, anyone who has such beliefs is less than himself. Colette also brings up an interesting point here as well, that conscience, the part of ourselves that causes us to feel remorse for bad actions, to want to right our wrongs, which stops us, most of the time, from making others suffer for no reason, is a spark of divinity in and of itself, is guided by the hand of a being that we cannot fully comprehend. The subtext of the scene, and the many trials endured by every member of our party at this point, is that to look beyond one's own needs, to suffer for the sake of others, to fix what wrongs were done before and leave behind something better for everyone, is a noble, righteous, even divine thing. This flies in the face of the do-everything-for-yourself, hedonistic, nihilistic mentality that unfortunately, I believe, is all too present in our own world, but in this case is embodied by Mythos, who once held the same kinds of belief as Lloyd and company, and has, being shown the wrongness of his ways in Martel's rejection through Colette, now come to believe in their diametric opposite. However, I'll argue something else too, that the construction of the Church of Martel and its worship in both worlds of the goddess was again part of this divine providence. In the end, the worlds are rejoined, watched over by the incarnation of Mana itself, who can be called nothing less than a goddess. Even before that, however, the Church of Martel was a source of comfort, a balm upon the wounds of the people, one that I believe was not allowed to flourish by Mythos' indifference or need for control, but by this divine being, this incarnation of Mana, through Mythos' actions. Though they could not stop his turn towards evil because of free will, it should be pointed out, however, that splitting the worlds was originally seen as a heroic decision, and the only one. In allowing the worship of Martel to spread, and its churches to gain power, divine providence, provided a place of comfort and tranquility, a spot of hope amongst the people. And in the end, all of those failed chosens did find a place of honor with the goddess, just as had been thought, laid out directly by Martel herself. Mythos' sister Martel is one of many souls within me. I am the symbol of the many lives sacrificed to the great seed. What higher place of honor, what more blessed place in heaven would there be, than to return to the fount of life itself? So let me just preface the coming section with this. In this house, where Christ is king, we love the whole party. Lloyd, a king. Genus understands the assignment every time. Rain, we stand a queen who can't cook. Regal, yes, capitalism. And already a duke? Yes. But for this section, and this portion of the argument, only Colette and Zelos matter. For it is, perhaps fittingly, in the stories of the Chosen of Silverant and the Chosen of Tethiala that the hand of divine providence makes its most overt moves. It is revealed in-game that the lineages of the Chosen are manipulated by Crucius to find someone with a mana signature closest to Martel's. However, I would say it was through Crucius' actions that Providence's hand works, bringing about the two who would regenerate the world and unite them fully. Even on a character level, it's suggested that Colette and Zelos are much more alike than they appear. Both hide their insecurities and worries behind cheerful and bright personalities, the kind that would deflect any questions as to their real feelings, and both prefer to take on their suffering alone. They also both learn a similar lesson, that even as chosen, they must learn to rely on others around them, because to the people who love them, they are more. Behind the veil of being martyrs for the goddess, they are just themselves. Their relationships with Lloyd in particular are where their similarities come out the most. It's because of Lloyd that Colette's soul returns to her, and it's because of Lloyd that Zelos, in no small part, decides that life is worth living, even with the burden of his title on his shoulders. I can hear some arguments already, that it was Crucius and Mythos who implemented the system, that ultimately the titles don't mean anything, but they do. They really do. For it's within this system, no matter how screwed up the methods, that were produced the only two truly successful chosen ones in either world, the ones who would bring it down. The arrow that flies accidentally and strikes an enemy miraculously between the seams of armor is accidental only to the archer, for the arrow's path was guided by Providence. In the same way, the cruelty of the system, and the tragedies, personal and otherwise, were products of free will. The manipulation of the mana lineages was only the method through which Providence worked, leading to the births of Claulet Brunel and Zealous Wilder. Think again of what Kratos says in the prologue. The angels bore the chosen one, who headed towards the tower that reached up unto the heavens, and that marked the beginning of the regeneration of the world. The circumstances of both of their lives tie them irrevocably to the fate of both worlds, and the united ones as well. Without Collett's journey unfolding as it did, the two worlds would have stayed ignorant of one another, and Lloyd's group would have never began their quest. Without Zealous's life, tragic as it was, playing out the way it did, without the corruption of Tethiala's church, he would not have come into contact with Lloyd and helped in facilitating the return of the goddess and the giant tree. All was guided by divine providence toward the ultimate goal of reuniting the worlds, and none would have been possible without the two chosens completing the final journey together. So, okay, I've gone on now for probably much too long about this, but hopefully I've left you with some meaningful questions or thoughts to ruminate on. Anyone can easily dismiss this as me completely overanalyzing the story of a decades-old JRPG, but I think that it's beneficial, needed even, to examine it this way. It's giving the topics and questions raised by the story the respect they deserve. And to me, Symphonia is definitely deserving. Like the goddess to her angels, I leave you, yes you, watching this video, an edict as well. You must look deeply into all things, for if we forget the lessons both the end and the beginning of a story give, there is no point in telling them in the first place. To quote Rain, if you don't understand, then make use of your remaining life to think about what it means for a person to live.